Hello everybody, welcome back to the Good Enough Homestead. Today I am working on a project for my chainsaw. It's a nice little tool that I really didn't know that I needed until I had it, so hopefully you guys can get something out of it. Um, the reason that I made it was because we've got a wood stove in the middle barn, and all of the logs that we would put in there would be too long, so I needed some way to make sure the logs would all fit in there every time. So this is a solution that I had found, and it works great. So I hope you guys enjoy. I started off by measuring the depth of the stove, and it was right at 14 inches. So I grabbed a piece of scrap PVC and measured it, made my mark, and I'm going to get ready to cut it off here. I use the crosscut sled on my table saw, but you could use a bandsaw, jigsaw, chop saw, whatever you have. Just cut it right on the line there, and you can cut it a little bit shorter if you want, so you don't have to worry about logs not fitting in there or fitting in there too tight. But I think I may have gone a little bit under 14 inches just to give me some clearance. And once I was done with that, I need a piece of wood to fit in the inside diameter of that piece of PVC. So I'm just marking the inside on a piece of scrap plywood, and I'm cutting it out. You'll notice some burning while I'm cutting this. I'm using a metal cutting blade to reduce the big chunks of wood that flies out when you normally use a wood cutting blade on plywood. So it leaves a little bit of a burn on the edges, but I'd rather that than be missing big chunks of wood. So I'll sand those off here in a second. I'm not too concerned about making a perfect circle here. It's not going to be seen, so just want to make sure it doesn't fit too loose. And obviously it has to seat all the way in there, so it can't be too big either. You'll notice when I go too fast, you get that choppy sound. Try to back off a little bit at that point and come back at it at a little shallower angle. But once that's cut out, I just use a orbital sander and sand off the high spots, sand down to my line. Just try to get a little bit of that burn off. Again, it's not a huge deal if you got some burn on there. I originally wanted to use that bottle of Gorilla Glue there. It's one of those expanding foam glues. I forget what the technical name of them are, but it was frozen, so that didn't work. So once I got those high spots sanded off, I did a dry fit here to make sure it was going to work. And if it would have been too big, I just would have gone back and sanded down to the line a little bit better. But it fit good and tight the first go around, so we went with that. And now I'm going to take it, and I just ended up caulking it in there. I originally tried using a 18 gauge nail gun to put some brad nails in there, but the PVC was frozen, and so it just chipped out a big piece of the PVC, so I had to cut it down and start over. So just a word of advice, don't use a brad nailer on cold PVC. It doesn't work very well. I'm assuming if I would have heated it up with a heat gun or something like that, made it a little bit more pliable, it probably would have been fine. But I also thought about pre-drilling some holes and putting screws in the sides here. That's a good option. I think I'll go back and do that just to give it some longevity, use of a tool here. So I just wanted to make sure that was flush on the bottom. I got rid of any excess caulk, because when that dries, I'm sure you know it leaves ridges. I wanted this to sit flat up against the magnet. So I used the back edge of one of my clamps and just tapped it down, make sure that was all flush, and I let it set for a few hours to dry. Caulk dries pretty quickly, so it didn't take long at all. And I'm back trying to get the tape off. It was kind of frozen to it, so it didn't come up very easily like painter's tape normally does. But once I got it going, I checked and everything was good and flat. So I pre-drilled a hole in the center of that piece of wood and attached my magnet. I did that off camera. So let's go try it out. So it just attaches on the bar, and since we measured that length, we know after every cut, all we got to do is put the end of that PVC in the cut line, and we'll be right at 14 inches or whatever your measurement happens to be. And the vibration got to it a little bit. I just bought a cheap ceramic magnet. If you wanted it to stay on there a little tighter, you can get one of those neodymium magnets or the rare earth magnets, whatever you needed, but this works pretty well for me. So there you go. Hope everybody enjoyed that. And there's our 14-inch. You can see the two that I cut were almost identical, so it works out well. Thank you guys.